right, welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman. Happy last weekend in July. Can't believe it. Summer is starting to really move by now. Was off on Thursday for my son's birthday, 4 years old, running around and just getting caught up with work on Friday. Wanted to put out something before the start of Rutgers football training camp. We now know officially begins on Monday, July 29th. The players arrive on Sunday. The program announcing today. Had Big Ten Media Day this past week. Covered a lot of ground there in terms of just perception and things that Greg Schiano and some of the players that were there, Tyrone Powell, Kyle Monungai, and Mo Toure, said. Some of the optimism from the Big Ten media in terms of Rutgers, the schedule obviously jumping out, but also just so many key players returning to this team that made progress last season, going 7-6 with the bowl win over Miami. As always, this episode is brought to you by Knights of the Raritan, the Rutgers NIL Collective. Click on the link in the description of this episode to join their free newsletter. They cover all things Rutgers athletics in terms of program updates, as well as things that their organization is planning and doing for this upcoming school year, and also how to become a member and how to help Rutgers student athletes with NIL. So in terms of Rutgers football, I wanted to do a little preview for camp. Now, this isn't a preview for the season. These are 5 areas that I think are important for Rutgers football during training camp to get kind of a handle on things and also make progress in heading into the 24 season. Keys to the season, 5 things I'm looking for, all that. That'll be a little bit different. We're going to have a lot of preview content coming out. Do positional previews with David Anderson in August. Also, a few different guests lined up, as well as some other kind of superlative and, hopefully fun and interesting content regarding to get you ready for Rutgers football season. But this episode going to cover 5 areas where I feel like Rutgers needs to make progress in training camp to have the season we all hope they have in 2024. So first off, offensive line. Some stability there, but some question marks as well. Obviously, the left side is looking very strong. You have Holland Pierce back at left tackle. You have Brian Felter back at left guard. And you have Gus Zolinkis at center. That is 3 starting positions essentially locked up. Guys with experience, detailed Felter's story before. He just is a guy that just they can't keep off the field. I mean that in a compliment in terms of him just being able to adapt and play multiple positions, and he proved very reliable last season at left guard. You have Holland Pierce back, tremendous story there as starting the program as a walk-on, and I fully expect him to be playing on Sundays after this season, and I think this season's all about just improving his draft status in terms of an individual standpoint. Obviously, Pat Flaherty has done a very good job with this group. Gus Zolinkis was reliable at center last season. But now it's about solidifying in camp the right side and deciding, is Rutgers going to have a set starting 5 this season? Are they going to have to rotate some guys on the right side of the line? A lot to be determined there. And obviously a crucial part of the overall plan for the offense and what this offense can ultimately become. So at right guard, you have Kobe Asamoah back, one most improved player in the spring, has started at right guard in the past. You also have Dante Chin competing for time against him. I would say entering camp, Asamoah certainly has the edge at this point, but I don't think it's a lock by any means. And there's also an interesting possibility with a transfer, which we'll talk about now at right tackle. You have 2 players that have been battling injuries. Tyler Needham won the starting role last year, had a significant lower body injury in the Temple game and missed the rest of the season. He's back. Now you have Reggie Sutton back once again. Still incredible comeback story there. A lot of great storylines here on the offensive line for Rutgers. But in terms of Reggie Sutton, certainly mobility was an issue last year, but just the fact that he's even on the field is a borderline miracle. And he's solid. I mean, he was their best offensive lineman before he had that catastrophic injury against Michigan a few years ago. And he definitely gave them some valuable time. He gave them some valuable reps last season. I think what Rutgers is looking for is getting stability at that right tackle position. They've brought in Shredrick Rhodes from Ohio. he has the ability to play right tackle or right guard. So that's where it's going to be interesting. You essentially have 5 guys competing for 2 spots. You have Chin and Asamoah at guard. You have Needham and Sutton at tackle. And then you have Shedrick Rhodes, who could potentially play either position. So it's going to be fascinating in training camp to see. I think of all position battles, first of all, there's not a lot in terms of the 2 deep because you do have so many starters back and key returners back. But I think this is a critical one, the right side of the line. Rutgers has to figure it out. Hopefully they feel comfortable with whoever does ultimately win the job. Hopefully someone does win the job. And just because they do ultimately, if they do choose to have a rotation, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a solidification or someone stepping up. And depending on who it is, guys like Needham and Sutton, they might want to protect their reps, so to speak, especially in the early going, and avoid any type of wear and tear. This is a long season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I think ideally, if you're talking about right tackle, the highest ceiling, you would like to see Tyler Needham win it. I think he has the highest ceiling in terms of that position. Sutton is a warrior, and Rhodes has an opportunity here, but yet to be seen if he can be an upgrade at right tackle. Coming from the MAC, had some success at Ohio, but it's going to be really interesting to see that right tackle battle. And then you hope that Kobe Asamoah makes it an easy decision for the coaching staff, and they have full confidence in him at right guard. Dante Chen, give him credit. He's been battling for a couple years now, so interesting to see how he looks in camp. And then, as I mentioned, Rhodes could be a fallback plan at guard as well. So there is some depth. There is some versatility there, different ways they could go. But having that lack of stability at the right side really makes the left side so crucial in terms of what you have coming back, the known entities, the level of play that we saw from those guys last year in terms of Holland Pierce, Brian Felter, and Gus Linkis. And hopefully, as a group, this offensive line, which definitely played better than I think a lot of people expected last season, wasn't perfect, was helped by the fact that Wimsatt was somewhat mobile, although we've talked about in the past, him not making the best reads in terms of his carries and running the RPO. However, certainly helped the offensive line in terms of being able to get him out in space and in the pocket. You have Ethan Kalik-Manis, a little bit more of a traditional pocket passer now. So the offensive line going to make a little bit of an adjustment there. You do have a healthy Sam Brown back complementing Kyle Monungai. So I do think the offense is going to evolve some and be different. And that leads to my second area that's so crucial. This training camp, that is the rapport that Ethan Kalik-Manis continues to build with the wide receiver core. It's going to be essential to the success of the pass offense this season. And obviously, Kalik-Manis named starter after spring camp. Shiano touching on it this past week at Media Day, talking about giving him the opportunity to be the guy this offseason, really build a rapport with the offense, particularly the wide receivers, who Shiano also was quoted as saying will be markedly better this season. And I think there's real reason to believe that. I think you have, in terms of your starters, I think you could pencil in Demir Miller, the All-American transfer from Monmouth, should be, hopefully will be, the best playmaker in this wide receiving core for Rutgers, and a playmaker that Rutgers hasn't really had in the past game in some time. You have Christian Dremel, the leading receiver from last year, in the slot back. He's a lock, and he should be even more dangerous in the sense of defenses can't focus on him as much with Miller, with more talent in that wide receiving core, and more receivers that can get downfield with a quarterback that hopefully can deliver downfield. Could open things up more for Dremel in the slot. So excited to see what he can do. He's another great story. Former walk-on, has just been nails for this program. Was most improved player in the spring 2 years ago, and now looking to build off of last season. And then that third receiver position, I think you'd have to say, based on last year and just in terms of potential, Ian Strong probably enters camp as the favorite there. Has great size, great hands. Really did some eye-popping things last year. Wasn't as consistent, didn't get a ton of reps at times, but I think that a year under his belt in the program, no longer a true freshman. What he was able to do as a true freshman, that first game against Northwestern was probably the highlight catch of the year. But high hopes for Ian Strong and his career at Rutgers and entering his second year with the program. Would be great to see him assert himself and win that third starting receiver role. And I think with Miller and Strong, ability for them to get out in space, to get downfield, to make plays after the catch, certainly makes the Rutgers receiving core more dangerous on paper. And then in terms of the two deep, I think you're looking at Nassim Brantley now, eligible after having to wait all of last season for not. But he's going to provide some experience, an FCS All Conference player, is in his second year in the program. He understands the offense. I think that's going to allow him to hit the ground running. Obviously, there might be some rust there and just a little bit of time and adjustment in terms of getting back to game speed. But he should be a valuable fourth receiver, I think, for this team. And then you have some young talent that is super exciting. Fama Toure, redshirt freshman, brother of Mohamed Toure. Talked about that a little bit at Big Ten Media Day. He really, I think, has a great chance of emerging on the two deep, as well as two freshman receivers in Corey Duff and Ben Black. Benjamin Black heard a ton about in the spring from North Carolina, really turned heads with his speed and playmaking ability. And then also Corey Duff, obviously, big-time recruit, local recruit that Rutgers has been really high on for years and was a big win on the recruiting trail. I think both of those guys have a I would say on paper, certainly should be factors going into this year, along with Fama Toure. That's 7 receivers there. We'll see who else could emerge. Obviously, injuries. I know Chris Long is back. I think it's going to be a little bit of a uphill battle for him to break back in the two deep, just because Rutgers has loaded up that young talent. There's some explosiveness there. There's speed there. There's playmaking ability there. You have guys that can get downfield and make plays for you. Now, it's a matter of doing it in the season, but that's where training camp is so important. And then building a rapport with Calais Manis, the young question starter, going into the season, and really finding out what works. Kirk Shiraka with the playbook. Greg Schiano talking this week about the genius of Shiraka in terms of understanding what personnel he has and how to tailor the offense to that personnel. And he did emphasize he feels like with the receivers, this is Schiano emphasizing with the receivers they have going into this season, they feel like they can do a lot more in terms of the offense. Of course, you need a quarterback that can deliver the ball accurately, consistently. Let's hope Ethan Kaliakmanis is that guy, and this offense can take not just one step forward. And even if they did just take one step forward, it would be a big impact on this team. But if they could take 2, maybe I'm getting greedy, maybe 3 steps forward, whatever that looks like on paper, on the field, 3 steps forward, this offense and this team ceiling could really rise. And when we're talking about 9+ wins as a dream, some think it should be the expectation. You need that pass offense. And again, I still think Rutgers is going to be a run-heavy team, but they need to make the passing game count. They need to have a threat in the passing game. They need to keep defenses honest. They need to be able to complete passes down the field, yards after catch. They need explosive plays in the pass game, which they haven't had for years. I think there's real hope that they can do that this season. In terms of defense, another area I think that is going to be key in training camp is solidifying that middle of the defense in terms of that linebacking core. Tyvian Powell was at Media Day, spoke, as did Greg Schiano. Everything sounds like he's on course to be ready for the start of the season. Obviously, had the wrist injury after the Indiana game last season, missed the rest of that season, and the defense was dramatically different without him. Now, granted, the schedule did ramp up quite a bit. That was a factor as well. But I really think Powell is such an anchor for this defense. And then he had a setback in winter workouts. Schiano talking about how it was just a fluke, non-contact injury and tore his Achilles. So not only will he be ready for the start of the season, how far along is he in his development in terms of back from the injury, rust shaking off, and just being ready for game speed, strength, all that. It may take him a little while, and that's okay. You have Howard and Akron on the schedule early on. There's no reason to rush him into things. Having that bye week in week 3 is kind of key for several reasons, but also for players like him to give him a little extra time. If he could be a full go and be a key starter at the 3rd game of the season at Virginia Tech, that would certainly be a huge boost, not only for Powell, not only for the defense as a whole in terms of having him out there, what he physically can do, and the playmaker that he can be on defense, but what it does for the rest of the defense, specifically how they're able to utilize Mo Toure, who's also at media day. I think that certainly was a factor in the Rutgers defense not being at the same level towards the end of the season as they were the first 2 months. Again, the competition ramped up, but they also lost that versatility with Powell being out. Mo Toure was no longer able to be moved around. They can line him up at edge at points, where you move Aaron Lewis inside on pass rush and you put Mohamed Toure on the edge, giving offenses different looks, being able to move. I mean, Toure is, I think, in my opinion, the best defensive player on the team, and being able to line him up in different ways is a valuable asset. And if Powell isn't full go or struggles to kind of regain his form, you're not going to have that versatility again. And Toure is going to be in the middle of the defense, which is still a great place for him to be. Don't get me wrong. It's a luxury to be able to have a guy like Powell be a rock in the defense. And he also, just in terms of how he is able to make reads on the offense, in terms of how they line up, he's valuable in so many ways. But in terms of being able to move Toure around, it also comes down to the development of Moses Walker and everybody else in terms of the linebacking core during training camp. So that is a big question mark in terms of linebacking core. How can they, the stability there and just the rotation that they're going to have. If they can rely on Moses Walker to step up and Powell is healthy, then you're going to be able to move Toure around like they have in the past. Maybe not as much as in the past. However, having that option, being able to get different looks, even if it's on third down, whatever, and also just Moses Walker, his ceiling, coming in, supremely talented, high 4-star, had the injury as well with Mo Toure 2 years ago. Didn't get much action last season, a little bit towards the end, but they've been real high on him from spring camp, and he needs to have a really good training camp. I think he will, and I think he's a player who's going to be a factor this year. So if Powell can't go, you need Moses Walker most likely to be the guy to step up alongside Toure. If Powell can go and can regain his form, he's one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. Then you have the options of being able to mix and match Toure and Walker, move Toure around, move Aaron Lewis around. You just make Rutgers defense that much harder to prepare for, that much harder to block, that much harder to stop. And that would be, I think it's a key part of this defense stepping up and being able to take another step forward and really emerge as an elite Big Ten defense, top third of the conference, top 15, top 20 defense nationally. And I'm not just talking about, total yards allowed. That's how a lot of things are measured in terms of, top 20 defense, whatever. I mean, in terms of all the different analytics and everything, just how this team measures up, how this defense measures up. They're old, they're grizzled. They're not going to be fooled by a lot. And the more versatility they have as a defense in terms of personnel, and that also does with development in terms of training camp and other guys being able to develop, other guys being able to step up. You obviously have your three safeties back with Flip Dixon, Desmond Igbenusin, Shaquan Loyal. That's huge. You have stability at cornerback with Robert Longerbeam, Eric Rogers. How is that too deep ultimately going to figure out? And those guys getting reps in training camp to solidify things. You have Malcolm Ray now in the middle of the defense. Can they establish a pretty deep rotation? 8, 9, 10 deep would be huge. Shiano talking this week about not generating enough of a pass rush from their front four next season. And again, going back to my original point about linebackers, if you can insert Toure at times, if you can move Aaron Lewis around at times, Wesley Bailey around at times, having that versatility will be huge in helping to generate a natural pass rush out of that front four without having to blitz. Moving on, 2 more areas. So far, we've covered the offensive line, figuring out that starting lineup and the rotation in terms of the rapport between Cali McManus and the receiving core, building that 2 deep in the receiving core, making plays out of the pass game. Now talked about linebacker stability with Tyreen Powell, hopefully being able to regain form pretty quickly at the start of the 24 season, and the versatility that opens up for this team. And then what younger guys are going to step up? Building off my last point, 2025, you're going to have a lot of opportunity. David Anderson and I are going to dedicate a whole episode to that soon. But training camp is an opportunity for the younger guys to really shine, to get more reps, to stand out. Who's going to sneak into the two deep? Who's going to emerge as kind of next man up if there are injuries to that two deep? Some freshmen to watch out for. I mentioned Benjamin Black and Corey Duff. I think Kaj Sanders is a guy at safety, somebody to watch for. A lot of redshirt freshmen back that have a year now in the program. We saw Bo Mascow. I think he's going to get more run this year. So there's a lot of guys that could step up, in terms of. You also have Jashawn Benjamin in his second year with the program at running back. Kyle Monungai shouted him out at the Big Ten Media Days as a guy that he thinks could emerge this season. You also have a bunch of freshman running backs that could end up being that third back, whether it's Gabe Winovich, whether it's Antoine Raymond, whether it's Ed Grier. So there's a lot of youth that's kind of in the out, kind of hanging out behind the two deep that could emerge this season, and training camp is a huge opportunity for them. And as a developmental program, as Schiano loves to continue to promote, which is very true, you need development in training camp. Even if it's guys that aren't necessarily going to make the two deep right away, this is an opportunity for them to gain valuable reps. There's going to be multiple scrimmage and intra-squad scrimmages. It's an important time for the youth of this program to take a step forward as well. Even if we don't necessarily see the gains on the field right away in 24, it certainly will help move things forward and put this team in a better position going into spring 2025. And lastly, major point, not breaking news by any means, but they need to get through training camp healthy. You need to get through training camp healthy. You need to get through training camp healthy. They have to avoid any major injuries to key players. The opportunity that they have in front of them this season with this group coming back, the schedule that's in place, the stability within the coaching ranks, the veteran leadership on this team. Talking this week at Big Ten Media Days about how it's a player-led program now. You need those leaders on the field. You need them healthy. You need that depth. You need the playmakers there. So you have to go about training camp the best way you know how. And Greg Schiano certainly knows how to craft and develop a team and build the team in training camp. But it's going to be critical that this team stays healthy. Obviously, the strength and development program under Jay Butler, strength and conditioning, it's going to be fun to see this week just in terms of updated weights and how guys look. There's going to be a lot of specimens out there really making strides in the weight room this offseason. See it out on the field now starting next week. But a big part of it is this program being able to stay healthy. Obviously, throughout the whole season, attrition is just a big part. And some of that's luck, right? But in terms of the Big Ten, talking to people, there's a lot of teams that aren't that deep past the two deep of their depth chart. Rutgers is as well positioned for their two deep as they've been in years. Obviously, a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience behind that two deep. So, as I mentioned, establishing some answers there for next man up if it comes to that. But hopefully it doesn't come to that at all. If not, certainly not in August. So getting through training camp healthy, coaches are certainly going to do their best to do that, and the players. And I think it's a matter of just the buy-in and commitment of these players and how hard they've worked in the offseason since spring. They're going to be raring to go, and they're in the best physical shapes of their lives. And this team has an opportunity in front of it. Super exciting. So there you go. 5 things that I think are key for this team heading into training camp 2024. Expectations super high. The offense has to take a step forward. That includes stability at offensive line, consistency at offensive line, the pass game taking a step or two or more forward with Cali McManus and a new receiving core. The defense really solidifying the middle with their linebacker play and how that impacts the rest of the defense. Developing younger guys behind the two deep that are ready to step up. You're going to have true freshman play, especially on special teams. You're going to have redshirt freshman play, especially on special teams. There's no doubting special teams is critical. Schiano reemphasized this week that he takes a lead role in that. There is no special teams coach on the staff. Schiano plays a big role in special teams. We saw how impactful special teams was last year with the 3 key blocks that led to scores that changed games. Michigan State, Miami, Indiana, all huge plays. But in terms of younger players developing. They're going to be key on special teams, and then staying healthy, having that two deep preserved for the start of the season. You have 2 games Rutgers should absolutely win, and then you have a bye week, which at the time I wasn't so happy about. And now, looking at the schedule, having a bye week to prepare for that road game at Virginia Tech, which is a swing game, Washington at home on short rest, the blackout game that Friday night, then at Nebraska, and then home for Wisconsin before UCLA and homecoming. I mean, that's going to set the ceiling of your season right there. Those 4 games in terms of at Virginia Tech, Washington, at Nebraska, Wisconsin, you need to be healthy. And having those key games, and we saw what happened last year with so many tough opponents in November, it really did take a toll on Rutgers and its health. And if they can be healthy for that 4-game stretch early in the season, the first half of the season, they could reap the rewards for the development that's occurred in this program over the years. And this is where you want to bear the fruit. And you got to be on the field. You got to be healthy to bear that fruit. They've done everything right so far. If Rutgers can get to the start of this season where they're too deep intact and or mostly intact with minimal setbacks on the injury front, you got to feel even better about this team going into 2024. We'll have plenty of coverage this week coming with training camp now beginning, and we'll have interviews posted to the YouTube site as well, so check those out. But really exciting time. Training camp is here. Rutgers preparing for Thursday, August 29th, the season opener at home, 6 p.m. against Howard. Just a month out now, and things are getting going. Exciting times on the banks. Thanks so much for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful Podcast.